Whether you like it or not, we've always needed 4chan. We just didn't realize it. In 2003, a 15-year-old boy created a site called 4chan, where outcasts, weeboos, and autists would all drool over anime. Every day, this site would slowly expand, with more and more outcasts coming together for more and more discussions. However, soon enough, these discussions radiated across the internet. 4chan became the breeding ground for a new wave of internet culture, memes, and ideas. Because of this, the voiceless outcasts were now the center stage of the internet, and with their newfound voice, they could get back at those who'd shunned them to the shadows, the media, celebrities, conglomerates, and governments, until finally they got their revenge. Amen! Amen! But to understand how this happened, we have to start simple in order to understand the whole picture. So we'll begin with this. His name is Pepe the Frog. Pepe the Frog first appeared in a 2005 comic called The Boy's Life. The comic depicts Pepe and his anthropomorphized animal friends behaving like a normal college bro. In one of these comics, Pepe responds to a question about him going to the bathroom, to which he responds, "Feels good, man." A reference that would later become synonymous with 4chan. Because Pepe resembled the average 4chan user. Soon enough, Pepe and his catchphrase took on a new life of their own. And by the year 2009, Pepe the Frog gained a place on Know Your Meme. With Pepe's growing omnipresence, alternate iterations of Pepe began to prop up. There was the sad Pepe, the smug Pepe, and the angry Pepes, which further catalyzed Pepe's fame, allowing the frog to spread across Reddit, Facebook, Tumblr, and eventually all social media. You see, through 4chan's binding spirits of repression, revenge, and free expression, Pepe was starting to represent more than just a meme. Pepe was instead becoming the flag for freedom of speech, radicals, conspiracy theorists, and average internet users. But to understand how Pepe went from being just an innocent meme to suddenly becoming a global expression of free speech, we first need to really understand what 4chan is in the first place. With no money, no wealth, no initial investments, 4chan was never really a business. In fact, even after running the site for 6 years, Paul was losing money with $20,000 in debt. Because 4chan was never about the money. Instead, 4chan was just a means of 15-year-old Christopher Poole connecting with fellow weebs.
So I was into anime when I was 15, for a summer.
Also that 4chan could unite students like himself to discuss Japanese culture and anime. Because in this time, the people into Japanese culture were mostly isolated outcasts who couldn't express their passion to anyone. They were anxious outsiders with a lot to say but no one to say it to. So 4chan provided the perfect outlet for outcasts across the world. And not just weebs. 4chan quickly expanded its discussions to all sorts of subjects. Video games, music, literature, fitness, politics, and sports, drawing outcasts from everywhere to this one anonymous site, where all the people who were seen as geeky and nerdy for using the internet in 2003 would all join in for discussions. This was a time before social media, iPhones, and dopamine-sucking videos. In fact, the concept of all these outsiders congregating on 4chan was revolutionary. So unsurprisingly, 4chan became the birthplace of internet culture. Many of these early memes on 4chan would later come to define the internet. The first of these was the 2005 lolcat, a simple meme that combined the image of a cat with some text. It's pretty bland now, but back in the early days of the internet, this was never seen before. It was a defining moment for 4chan. And soon enough, 4chan's memes would evolve into trolling. It was around March 2007 when GTA 4's trailer first released. The overwhelming popularity for the game caused Rockstar's game to crash. So a helpful 4chan user posted a YouTube link that supposedly led to the GTA trailer, but of course, this wasn't actually a link to the trailer, it was a link to Rick Astley. The Rickroll was born, and this was only the beginning. On July 2007, a niche song by Tay Zonde was posted to 4chan. The song was called Chocolate Rain.
In chocolate rain.
Being a strange, niche, and terrible song, 4chan users collectively swarmed to increase its YouTube ranking for the memes. And as you probably already know by now, Chocolate Rain would take over the internet and seep into mainstream culture. This was one of the first examples of how 4chan users can make their memes meta.
Nothing takes priority over chocolate rain.
The voiceless outcasts could now make a meme not only spread through the internet, but also through the real world. Like when 4chan trolled Mountain Dew. Back in the day, Mountain Dew developed a marketing campaign where customers could vote on what to call the next Mountain Dew. Now, no normal person in society with friends, community, or stable mental health would even give this a second thought, but 4chan users were different. They were the underclass of outcasts who'd been estranged by society. So 4chan banded together to troll Mountain Dew, voting in the thousands and winning the vote to name Mountain Dew's drink this. And then there were the other more extreme forms of trolling. The trolling that didn't just stop at playing harmless trolls on businesses. The trolling that would take 4chan's voice to the next level. This sort of trolling began when a bunch of anonymous 4chan hackers formed the group known as Anonymous. Back in the early days of 4chan, these hackers were realizing the power of 4chan. These were hackers who didn't care about making money, they cared about trolling. So 4chan anons would begin to take their anger out of the world that had made them feel like outcasts. The first incident of this mass trolling came in 2006 when a bunch of 4chan users invaded the Habbo Hotel site, where they blocked the site stating it was closed due to quote, fail and AIDS. This trolling gave 4chan users the real life spotlight they craved, with mainstream media calling these anonymous 4chan hackers as hackers on steroids, and calling 4chan a quote, internet hate machine.
They call themselves anonymous, they are hackers on steroids, treating the web like a real life video game, sacking websites, invading MySpace accounts, disrupting innocent people's lives. And if you fight back, watch out.
But this would only further grow 4chan's appetite for trolling, and in 2008, this trolling would be taken to the next level. So in 2008, their main target would be the freedom-stifling, power-hungry, money-grabbing organization known as the Church of Scientology, because all these 4chan users held the same convictions, supporting freedom of speech and being anti-establishment at all costs. So after the Church of Scientology's repeated copyright takedowns and censoring of content they didn't like, 4chan users trolled the church by DDoSing their website, sending back faxes designed to waste their ink cartridges, and rickrolling the church. 4chan anons would actually start to publish YouTube videos in a robotic anonymous voice telling the church, for the good of your followers, for the good of mankind, and for the laughs, we shall expel you from the internet. And as you'd expect, these videos went viral. This was unprecedented. People around the world actually started joining in with these 4chan anons, wearing the same Guy Fawkes masks and engaging in real-life protests to represent their battle against the establishment. It was becoming clear that no one could escape the wrath of 4chan, where the lonely, anxious outcasts were now connected en masse, taking back revenge on all of those looking down on them from above. And in particular, this formation of Anonymous began to symbolize resistance against everyone looking down on the little people, which is why these 4chan hackers would troll major banks, they would take down opponents of WikiLeaks, they would even provide a helping hand in the Arab Spring riots. And in 2012, these 4chan hackers hacked 485 Chinese government sites in protest of the government's tyrannical treatment of their citizens, in which they would urge the world to fight for justice, fight for freedom, and fight for democracy, all of which were the key pillars that came to define 4chan. Once a site for weeb outcasts was now a site expanding the frontiers of the internet, setting the precedent for memes, trolling, and real-world accountability. These outcasts were on the front stage doing their bid to break the world from the chains of tyrannical governments and predatory money-stealing organizations from the voiceless masses. And it was this very sentiment that would bring about one of the weirdest moments in modern history. But you may be wondering, why would anyone care enough to put all of this effort into trolling? All the time, effort, and risk, especially when there's no money involved. Why would 4chan users do this? Well, this question's a lot more complex than it first seems. It's the question banks, corporations, and governments have been trying to figure out for years. Because the answer to this question is the key to understanding Anonymous,
we are anonymous,
political extremism, and the destabilization of Western society. This is a question that goes way beyond 4chan. However, the basic answer to this question might just be that 4chan users have no means of expressing their shadow self. 4chan's a means for millions to express their raw, innate thoughts without a filter. It's a place where you can release your anger at a world that you see crushing your psyche. It's a place to take off the mask of your plastic, friendly, anxious veneer and release your repressed shadow side. And so it all comes back to Pepe the Frog. By this point, Pepe the Frog was the established mascot of 4chan's political discussion board known as Poll. The discussion board Poll is a gathering spot for millennial and zoomer outcasts, the lonely and despondent, the socially incompetent generational dropouts and radicals. You'll find all shades of disaffected people here, each one bonded by disdain of the elites who had shunned them away, that made them feel worthless, moneyless, and voiceless. So to 4chan users, Pepe represented the gestalt of this connecting resentment. Pepe was the perfect troll to represent the 4chan user. Pepe gave 4chan a face, something to represent this underlying resentment felt by 4chan users. Because coinciding with 4chan's growth was the rise of our current economic stagnation, the massive inequalities in money and wealth, and the decaying sense of community in our globalized world. So Pepe the Frog represented this rejection of corporatized linear values. It represented the breaking of the confines of convention and conformity. So you get all these people scattered around the world on this anonymous discussion board that is time-capped with a lot to say about the world around them. This was unironically a very powerful force, an organized goal-seeking minority against the indifferent, apathetic majority. They had a flag, a mascot, and a community, but there was one part that was missing in all of this. They needed a real-world leader to take things to the next level. And in 2015, this very thing happened.
And we are going to make our country great again.
A real-life troll with all the money in the world had now taken the front stage of American politics. A billionaire troll insulting all the other corporate-lying politicians to their faces. No one could have expected that a leading presidential candidate would be saying things like this.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
He referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it. All right. Okay.
And then I see Rick Perry the other day, and he's so, he's doing very poorly in the polls. He put glasses on so people will think he's smart. And it just doesn't work. People can see through the glasses.
The 4chan ethos had been brought to life. Trump broke down the corporatized core veneers of these power-hungry sociopaths. He represented all the boiled-up repression, the outcasting, and the anger of the average 4chan poll user. And the Trump campaign knew this all too well, with Trump always retweeting Pepe memes.
We will make America great again.
These 4chan memes continue to proliferate on Trump's path to office. It was all in response to the corporate elite's disregard for the outcast, the nonconformists, and the autists. This was perfectly summed up with Hillary Clinton's blatant disdain of Trump supporters, which further grew the Pepe meme in response.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
So as you'd expect, this brought a wave of negative media coverage towards Pepe and 4chan. And so soon enough, the Pepe Frog turned into a symbol of hate, where it was claimed that radical components of 4chan had begun to appropriate the meme for their own agenda. But in reality, this appropriation was only magnified to further ostracize 4chan users and what they represented.
Oh, who is this 4chan?
With Hillary Clinton's campaign even going so far as to describe Pepe as a symbol of radical hate. All of this to just criticize Trump's use of the meme. And then the ADL jumped on board, and suddenly Pepe was the apogee of the culture war. But all of this media criticism couldn't stop Pepe and its true meaning. Because Pepe didn't just represent Trump supporters or the radical right as the media makes out. Pepe is simply a meme. It's a meme representing 4chan's true core, a core of free speech. I already know that some of you will think this is outrageous, considering all the terrible things that have come as a result of 4chan with all its incels and radicals, but I'm going to explain to you why, no matter your political affiliations, Pepe and 4chan are a necessary function of society. 4chan is the last bastion of free speech. There is no other site or forum with such wide appeal and yet little to no moderation. It's the only site that doesn't care about the money from advertisements, and that's what makes it so hated by almost all of the establishment. People like to think that 4chan's only a place for radicals and losers. But even if this is the case, that's exactly why we need 4chan, because nowhere else would you get to see these views, which is incredibly important to having a healthy society. As Christopher Hitchens once said, if someone's voice is silenced, then I am deprived of their right to hear. Moreover, I have never met nor heard of anybody I would trust with the job of deciding in advance what it might be permissible for me or anyone else to say or read. The freedom of expression consists of being able to tell people what they might not wish to hear, and that it must extend above all to those who think differently is, to me, self-evident. Of all the things I have ever written, the one that has gotten me the most unwelcome attention from the people I respect is a series of essays defending the right of Westerners to publish their views. I did this because I think a right is a right, and also because if this right is denied to one faction, it will not stop there. And this perfectly describes why 4chan is so necessary. Because to hear extreme and radical views is a part of learning how to think. And our biggest challenge in society is that millions have been taught what to think and not how to think. We live in a world where far too many things have been taken on trust and people get away with far too much. And this is only continuing exponentially. Whilst at the same time we see the people in power, we see our society increasingly devalue the necessity of free speech. Where claims of offense, insult, and hate are used to shut down freedom of speech, our culture is collectively forgetting that freedom of speech is a freedom, which, like all freedoms, comes with responsibilities. We forget that the freedom to say certain things doesn't mean you should say them. We forget that freedom of speech needs to be untrammeled. People need to express their shadow side. They need to express dark views to the world, because only then can they escape their idiosyncratic dogmas by facing real-world criticism, where you'll be smacked with social consequences for saying things that are stupid and harmful. But more importantly, if you don't use your free speech, you eventually lose your free speech. Without free speech, there isn't true thought. And no, this isn't just some right-wing platitude. As the infamous socialist Rosa Luxemburg once claimed, the freedom of speech is meaningless unless it means the freedom of the person who thinks differently. We always forget that freedom of speech is one of the key Enlightenment values that made the West so great, which is why 4chan is unironically just an extension of these long-held Enlightenment values. 4chan is an antibody to a diseased, parasitic culture that seeks to reduce society to one huge vat of grey sludge, serving as one of the last platforms for free expression away from the control of governments, powerful interest groups, religions, and businesses. And in a way, these are the very same values that also made the internet so great. Pepe the Frog is a symbol of free expression no matter the expression used. This just couldn't be better summed up with Pepe being used in Hong Kong's final march against the tyrannical tentacles of the Chinese Communist Party. In the 2019 Hong Kong protests, Pepe was used as a symbol of free speech, a symbol of liberty and resistance against the dystopian tyranny of the Chinese government, proving that Pepe the Frog could be reclaimed and repurposed despite the establishment's campaign to associate Pepe as a hate symbol. Pepe the Frog doesn't mean the Hong Kong protesters are radical right-wingers, even despite what the soulless journalists try and make out, because opposing a communist regime that crushes all dissent and imposes an Orwellian social credit scorn as populist doesn't make you a right-winger. Instead, this was a nation's youth fighting for their country's future, going up against one of the most fearsome military regimes on the planet.
Anyone who dares to try to do that will have their heads bashed blooded against the Great Wall of Steel.
The people waving the Pepe the Frog flag were risking everything: incarceration, torture, and a nightmare future trapped in China's social credit score system.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb.
And in the crypto world, you'll also find Pepe, because cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum represent a liberation from a corrupt financial system, a liberation from monopolized mega banks and their preying political interests. There is a common thread throughout 4chan's past and present that connects us to the world we see today. It's a thread that explains this one strange moment in history, and it's also a thread that explains why we've never needed 4chan as much as we do today. But before we get onto that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. Modern portfolio theory suggests that one's overall portfolio risk can be reduced by combining asset classes that have a less than perfect positive correlation. With the craziness of the markets recently and inflation reaching a 30-year high, people are looking for uncorrelated alternative assets to allocate a percentage of their portfolio to. And the asset class I discovered with great risk adjustment returns and low correlation to the stock market is art. But you may ask, why art? Well, since art has a low correlation, if the market starts correcting, the value of art won't fall in value as much as the broader stock market. And in the past 25 years, Masterworks' Contemporary Art Index has outpaced the S&P total returns by 174%. This means that $100 invested in contemporary art in 1995 would be worth $2,423 today, while the same amount invested in the S&P 500 would be worth $842. Although past performance doesn't guarantee future results, these figures are impressive. It's no wonder so many millionaires and billionaires allocate over 10% of their overall portfolios to art. But I'm not a billionaire and don't have millions to spend on a painting. But thanks to Masterworks.io, regular people like you and me can diversify our portfolios with art. Masterworks.io is the first and only online platform that allows everyone to buy and sell shares in multi-million-dollar artworks. Their platform features legends like Warhol, Picasso, Banksy, and many more. Now you don't need hundreds of millions to add fine art to your portfolio. You can sign up and invest in Masterworks in just a few clicks. You create an account, browse their artwork, and invest in any of their current offerings. From there, you can either hold your shares until Masterworks sells the painting, or you can trade your shares on their secondary market. And with over 270,000 people signed up, demand is high. So I'm working with Masterworks.io to let you skip their waitlist and get priority access. Just click the link in the description below. Now back to the video. 4chan itself isn't all that powerful. 4chan isn't YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or even Reddit. 4chan is just a simple image board with a simple design. There's really not much more to it. 4chan hardly makes any money. In fact, according to Business Insider, 4chan is only worth $45,000. And yet the innocuous design, the limited revenue, the limited control makes 4chan the most essential social media platform. Because unlike other social media sites, there is no financial gain to lose by allowing free speech on the site. Instead of being plagued by corrupt Reddit mods, censoring administrators and media bribery, 4chan is the world's greatest experiment in free speech. And with its history of outcasts, trolls, and voiceless people all coming together on this free speech hub, strange things are always bound to happen. But it's only when you understand 4chan's history and the users of 4chan can you start to understand one of the weirdest moments in history. Now, I'm not going to go into the theories behind this movement, as I'm sure you already know by now. I'm also sure that any mention of this theory could get this video removed in a very short amount of time. But it doesn't matter, because the theory isn't the point. The point is, this moment happened for the very same reason Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring riots, and the Hong Kong protests happened. Now, of course, not all of them are equal in their justification. In fact, a lot of the trolling and outrage stemming from 4chan is incredibly toxic, because by now we all know the horrors that have stemmed from the 4chan world. But these things have no relation to the core pillars of 4chan, the pillars of free speech and freedom of thought. It's the twisted humans that use 4chan that are the problem, not the principles that 4chan stands on. And again, free speech isn't the problem, people are the problem. 4chan's where great things and terrible, terrible things happen. But in the end, 4chan is the last place for free speech. And that in its own right makes it one of the most important sites on the internet. Because we're now living in a world where an entire generation of millennials and zoomers have been frozen into a state of conformity. We live in a time where advertisers and businesses are pulling out all of their money from 4chan for fear of being cancelled. We live in a time where 4chan is scrutinised by the parasitic mob for allowing the expression of all ideas. 4chan is losing all of its investors, 4chan is losing all of its money, and the free speech spirit that 4chan fostered across the internet continues to dissolve at an ever-increasing rate. And sadly, 4chan's decline isn't an anomaly either. 4chan's decline represents our societal shift into becoming an ever-increasingly homogenized world, where all opinions that don't fit into the mainstream narrative are eroded by force, where the Enlightenment values that made 4chan as powerful as it is today are now just a relic of a bygone era, where the establishment continues looking down upon a growing underclass, where our leaders can no longer contain their tyrannical glee, where contrived self-righteousness and passive aggressiveness has come to define modern rhetoric. In this time, this cold anonymous time, we need freedom of thought to prevail now more than ever. 4chan, with all its flaws, with all the people who use their free expression to cause serious harm, where free expression has created theories that have embarrassed the most powerful nation, we need to look at the bigger picture on why the issues that come from free expression are just part of the price of freedom. We need to take a look at the bigger picture on why these events happen, on why there is an ever-growing underclass of people who have been betrayed by their governments, on why the issues that come from free expression are just a part of the price of freedom. 4chan is about more than memes, trolling and posting. It's about the Enlightenment values that are essential to all of our development, that teach us how to think and filter out junk information and expand our scope of perception. I know what I'm saying will enrage some of you, I know what I'm saying isn't popular, but so what? Free speech is never popular, and neither is 4chan. But both of them are of paramount importance, because for the first time in a long time, we should be deeply afraid for the future of freedom across the globe.